Hey everyone and welcome back to the channel. I see a ton of comments asking if I have a video covering a specific movement tech. The problem with YouTube is that it can be hard to find older videos, especially when they're years and years old. With specific movement like a tap strafe, this movement tech has bluntly just not changed. I did not want to keep just uploading on the same topic, especially when I felt like I covered it the first time. Today, I want to try and make it easy for you all and get all the info in one ultimate video. I gathered every video I have on movement that is still relevant and compiled it into one video, timestamped from beginner to advanced for ease of access. And I did edit just a little bit, tried to trim and make sure that it was a little bit more compact. Disclaimer, this video is long. Like really long, like big warning, it is super long. It is timestamped like I said, and hopefully you find the information you need. Also disclaimer, some content is in the older test range, but reviewing the video I felt like it was still relevant though. If you learned anything from this video, then I'm happy and it did its job. So don't forget to subscribe, enjoy, leave a like, and yeah, let's get ready to learn movement. To the channel. So today I have a very important video because this is one that, while it's a very basic guide, it's really best to go back to the fundamentals and really figure out what's going on with your movement. We're going to talk about slide jumping. We're going to talk about strafe dodging while in a gunfight. We're going to discuss even further a, very simple even misdirect. So this is a very important topic. Again, I'm going to be recording this raw. Most of the topics, when I segue, I'm actually going to talk about one where I segue and record my desktop. That's probably the only edit that you're going to see in this video, whenever I take a quick cut to that. But nonetheless, this is important because this is a reason why, 1, you're late to gunfights. 2, you might be losing your 1v1s in certain situations, whether close range, mid-range. All of this really adds up to your success on Apex Legends and even getting to your next rotation or getting out of a gunfight. I've also made the bots move in this instance because I'm going to show you how getting damage also lowers your momentum and velocity. Now real quick, one of the things, the values that I have on the upper left hand side of the screen, you see all these numbers going crazy. Right at the bottom left, you're going to see a number that says velocity. We're going to talk about how on Origin and Steam you can enable this. Unfortunately, I don't know how to enable this on console, but it really hits the premise on what I'm going to teach you for today. Okay, so on Steam, this is under your game, which is, I'm going to re-click on this again. So right click on Apex Legends, hit Properties. You're going to go to, for some reason I don't, there we go, Set Options, Launch Options. Right now I already have quite a few commands already in place. These are my own commands. I'm going to add in +CL_show POS1. That's how you launch it. Now if you're going to do this on Origin, you're going to follow a similar structure. Give me 1 second while I launch it. I may edit to segue right to the command. All right, we're almost there. Now, unfortunately, on console, I don't know how to do this. If somebody does, please let me know in the comment section, but I know this applies for PC, obviously for Steam and Origin. Plus side is that if you're on console, at least I can show you the values, and we can kind of learn it from there. So I'm going to go to Game Properties, Launch Options. I'm going to remove all these. I'm just going to have this one in here. So hit Save, and that's how you do it. All right, let's segue right into the video. So let us begin. All right, so the very bare basic, and you have to always find this momentum whenever you are moving around the map. So let's just say in Apex Legends, notice that your max movement is 299 units. This is whenever you're running at max speed. Obviously, holding a weapon will lower this cap just slightly, but this is important to notate. Now, one thing I do whenever I'm slide jumping, and this is important for all you guys, I have them both bound. But it's very important that your crouch is on toggle or hold, depending on what your personal preference is. There is no right or wrong here at all. So if you're on toggle, notice how I just click it and it just slides on its own. Now, if you happen to be on the other spectrum and you want to hold it, that's perfectly fine too. Now, I'm going to really break this down because I haven't really seen this in a lot of guides, and it's important to notate that you maximize on that movement. So you'll notice when you're sliding, you hit at one point in the slide a maximum speed of around 400. I may slow down this footage and recap it. You may hear my voice disappear. Voice disappear, but you'll notice that at one moment you hit the highest point in the slide. So what you want to do when you're slide jumping is you want to always maximize
your peak whenever you're sliding. Now, this is hard to time, but over time, as you do this, you'll start to get better and better. And of course, your movement, whenever you can slide again, does reset. So you have to have this internal clock knowing when you have to reset your slide. But if you do this right, I promise you're going to outbeat everyone in terms of your overall movement. I outbeat my friends when I'm moving. And the plus side to this is that when we incorporate everything else, when we talk about a redirect, when we talk about wall bouncing, and wall bouncing is going to be a video on Monday. I know I've talked about it, but I believe that that video deserves its own section where we can talk about it. So as you can tell, as you're sliding, this is where you build your momentum. This is very, very important because this, again, beats you out to everyone else that you're fighting against. And I use toggle whenever I'm doing mine, but you can definitely use hold if that's your personal preference. In my opinion, I guess with the jump, it just feels harder to time. You can also use your scroll wheel whenever you're doing a crouch. There's different combinations of this. Mine happens to be Z and then space, and that's just what feels comfortable for me. It may feel comfortable for a lot of others, which is perfectly fine. Experiment with keybinds on this.
Hello, this is actually Daz from the future now. So what I wanted to do is actually give you an extra tip when it comes to slide jumping I realized I didn't cover in this original beginner's guide. So the best tip I can provide is when you see your hands appear on screen, it gives you a nice visual indicator when you see the second hand appear. So 1, 2, and then you can slide jump. You see 1, 2, then you can slide jump. If you do it a little too soon, then you'll see what happens there. So before the hands appear, you'll dead slide. So a dead slide means that you didn't do a slide jump properly. And I really wanted to hit this point because this is the fundamental to every bit of movement tech. Whenever you slide jump and go into a wall bounce, whenever you slide jump and you need to get up and then perhaps do, anything mantling off of something, a super glide, anything like that is very key and a fundamental. So we have to make sure we get it right here. Wait for the second hand. And I would even give a little breath afterwards just to ensure. And then, of course, I'm going to cover now in a second what happens when you get hit, because unfortunately, when you get hit with any sort of bullets, it causes a slowdown. So if you know you're about to cross and you think you're going to get hit, so the best thing I can provide the tip to you, whenever I talk about this here in just a second, is to make sure that you give that breath of air. Otherwise, you're just going to death slide. And then afterwards, you see this kind of movement where you're like, why am I going so slow? Why is it not working? Wait for the hands to appear. Wait for I would even say the third one's probably the best bet just to be safe. And you can also time this with an heirloom if you have the same animation, does a pull-out animation, and then boom. I know we're spending a lot more time on this, but I was rewatching the footage and everything comes fundamentally down to making sure you can do a proper slide jump. Let's just segue back and talk about when you get hit.
Okay, now we're over here because I want to use the bots and show you what happens with a movement when you get hit. But let's talk about a redirect first. So obviously with a redirect, you slide, and whenever you want to redirect to the movement where you want to go, what you're going to do next is you're going to hit left, and then you're going to hit back. You don't have to press forward anymore. So if we're going to do this quickly and show in real time, you remove actually the W key. You no longer have to push forward because now you're putting different inputs. Now, if I was horizon, because I think this gets a lot more dramatic because of our movement. See, and now if you're doing the opposite direction, you go with the opposite keys. Right? And if you want to hone in it a bit more, then you can add the other direction to kind of even the misdirect out. This is beneficial whenever you're being chased, but also I'm using this to help you understand what happens with your momentum and your speed. So if we break this down very simply again, obviously you incorporate the slide jumping that we were discussing earlier, but while you're mid-air, you're going to hit left, then the back key, and then you're going to even out with the other key, right? Or if you're on controller, then even out with the other direction. So we slide, boom. We'll do the other direction. So this one is going to go left, back, and then even out with the other direction. Boom. Redirect. This is very beneficial when you're being chased. Now, this is perfect timing, actually. Good timing. So if you're moving around, you notice when I get hit, my values change. So I'm going to go and see. Notice how when I'm walking into a straight line, my value of whenever I'm being shot gets hit. It's important to note when you get shot, sometimes you're not able to do a slide jump because they're going to slow down your momentum and it's going to mess up your shots. Now, while we're here, let's talk about your movement when you're in a gunfight. Obviously, whenever you're ADS, your movement speed is going to be a lot slower. So now that we're here, and I realize that I have more cuts because the bots are kind of giving me a little bit of a hard time as I'm trying to do a tutorial and get the timing of this right. So that's always kind of fun. But nonetheless, actually, it is still all done in one take. I'm just running around the map, and I'm just segueing to a different point in time. So let's discuss what happens when you're in a mid-fight whenever we're going to do more of a dodge, as you see on screen. Okay? So as we talk about that dodge, it's important to notate that when you ADS, you have also a different movement speed. Notice that the movement speed of a Mozambique is 173.5 units. Now, if I pull out a Prowler, this has 147.8. If I pull out a Kraber, this has 60. So it's important to notate when you're in a gunfight what your movement speed per gun is. This also helps you land your shots and helps you improve your aim as well. Because as you can tell, this has 156. So if we grab this one has 156.5 as well. So it kind of helps put in perspective when you're aiming your weapons, knowing what movement speed you have, because it's going to mess up your aim. And it's going to make it a little harder to fight. So now we've gotten that out of the way, knowing that your ADS obviously slows. Because look at the max unit here. The max unit is 199.52. That's important to notate. So as we get in a fight, and remember, when you get shot, you slow down. Now, one thing you can do when you're in a gunfight, which is the biggest thing that you see pros do, is they have their strafe movement. Right? So there's two ways you can do this. We talked about the keybinds before. I recommend, actually, this is why I have it keybound to C, is to toggle. Because it helps the movement go immediately back up, and in a gunfight, the last thing you want to do, hold. I'm using hold in this instance. This is hold, and then I just let go. And the reason for that is because I'm perfectly fine with it going in the opposite direction. Now, if you use a toggle, now this can work for you too. But I always feel the timing is a lot more difficult to get with toggle. But again, one of you guys might be an absolute beast at this, which is perfectly fine as well. But notice how toggle, I just don't seem to have the same, timing right. Now, if I do hold, my timing is a lot better. Now, really, really important to notate, very, very important to notate whenever you're using your strafing, that doing this is not good. The reason why, and I actually may need to get a cut here as I go all the way over here. I'm going to show you in third person what it looks like. You want to be sure you complete the strafe, so your character maximizes on the movement. Why it looks really impressive when you're going super, super fast. In reality, I'm going to go in third person. And I also have a guide on this as well, so if you want that.
Sorry, we all need a bathroom.
All right.
Break, huh? Back from a wee kip.
So what happens whenever you go too fast? Notice how I'm going really, really fast, and then my head is not really ducking and weaving, right? No ducking and weaving, but if you complete the full animation, notice how the head definitely bobs and weaves a lot more. But if you have to complete the whole animation, it gives you more of a dodge. So while it may seem slower and less counterintuitive, is this actually a lot more beneficial than doing this? Because reality, when you're fighting somebody in a distance, this movement, when you look at it from their perspective, it looks like you're just in one big line, right? This is not really doing anything, but if you complete the movement and go all the way up and down, and this is a strafing that you see that's really hard to hit because they're actually doing movement up and down when you're trying to headshot them, that's the most daunting and overwhelming, right? So again, if you have your weapon, I'm going to go back to first person here in a second as well. It can look really impressive up close, but it's really not doing very much for you. Except for maybe changing out your hip fire a bit. Now let's go back to first person. So I'm going to need a moment while I run all the way over there. So I can remove the dead air here. Perfect. And we're back. It was only a flesh wound. Now we're back in first person. And I'm going to show you again. Be sure you complete the full movement. And you even see with the camera to make your... you harder to hit in a gunfight. This is the reason why you definitely will be losing some gunfights, because having more movement is key. Now remember, whenever you have this movement, you can do the same whenever you are ADS'd. Of course, it makes it harder for you to hit them, but that's just kind of the reality that we live in. So again, when you're in a gunfight, I'm going to go stand in front of this guy, because this bot, keep in mind these bots have terrible aim. But nonetheless, you will run into people who also have terrible aim in Apex, and this is the advantage that you're looking for, right? So stand in front of this guy. Let's let him shoot us, and we're just going to dodge. He's not going to be able to hit us because we're just going to dodge. Oh, he may hit us a little bit here and there. Make your path a little unpredictable, you know, slide around, move around. Everything we talked about thus far, the momentum, the movement.
Now, I wanted to segue to a gentle reminder that all legends move the same speed. Here's an example clip from a video I did before, so as you learn movement, keep this in mind.
First, we're going to compare Wraith and Gibby. First, they're both going to walk. Now let's do the comparison again, but now running. So obviously due to latency, I believe Marianas has started sooner, but overall outside of that, that really is the same, right? Now, again, we utilize no abilities, no slide jumping, none of it, just comparing the raw speed. For further testing, let's do Caustic versus Octane. Let's do them walking first. And now let's showcase them running. So again, the same premise applies to their FOV. Remember that. FOV is just what changes and makes things appear slower or faster, but in reality, you can see they're not slower. So quick answer, why are you slower or falling behind in game? Number 1, because you need to maximize your movement and slide jump.
Now, in the next video, we're going to teach how to climb effectively, a common mistake made by seasoned players.
For those that are even advanced, even if you're a newcomer to Apex Legends, how to effectively climb and how it can be very, very beneficial. So essentially just scaling walls, climbing walls. I'm going to show you a quick exercise here on this wall, and I even have the input overlay so you can see my inputs on how to effectively climb on Apex Legends. So hopefully I'll keep this really, really quick. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. So first off, climbing is very monumental because obviously, one, it gets you scaled up and you can climb various areas. The biggest thing to remember, we'll start basic and then we'll get a little more advanced, a little fancy as you like stick to walls. But remember, when you're hugging a wall, just holding W, you'll stick to the wall like glue. You'll notice as like I hold W and then I hold A and I can move just a little bit to the left, to the right, and so forth. This is monumental for climbing walls, to avoiding a gunfight, to even, let's say, a grenade. So if I throw a grenade on the wall and I need to close the distance a bit more and like I'm stuck in a room, you'll probably still take a little damage, but realize how much less damage I took compared to just standing here and taking the full blast. So there's a monumental difference in improving as you start to utilize the climb to either getting away from a fight, to scaling the side of a little mountain or something. You've seen that getting high and taking positioning is always king. So let's get a little more advanced. We've already kind of talked about the basics, avoiding explosions, avoiding grenades, even if there was a nade like right underneath you, to get higher, to even use it as a wall. If somebody's chasing you, how you can scale a wall and kind of juke them and then look in a different area. But let's talk about an exercise. I actually, whenever I started the game, this is what I did to actually warm up and practice on Apex Legends and how I got comfortable. It was scaling these walls right here. So what I did is I practiced on getting comfortable climbing really thin walls like so. Climbing, climbing, climbing. You can slide jump on these, by the way. You can slide jump even as you do a quick one and kind of get a faster movement speed. But notice the biggest thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to climb this. This is the exercise now. Climb this. Scale that, and then kind of just walk back and forth and just keep scaling. The thing is that I'm working on here is that it's a very tight spot, but once you got your crosshair like right over anything you want to climb, it's pretty much GG at that point. And these are very thin walls, and the beauty behind this, if you're scaling like a wall, notice how my input here, and we're going to go over this input in just a second, how you climb and kind of work, because it's not just a straight climb, you're kind of scaling left and right. So I want to break that down to its most simplistic form for you guys. And we're going to talk about this input by input. So climbing a wall, obviously you stick like glue, just hold W. You can hold shift if you have auto run, that's fine. I just hold shift out of habit. But just climbing the wall, you just go up, right? The next thing when you're here is you hold W forward. Now let's talk about as you start to scale the wall and you want to go towards the left or a different angle. So essentially hop on that like glue, and then you hold W, you're going to stick to glue like it, and then you hold A or D, or if you're on controller, you hold the direction that you want to go. You hold the stick to the upper left-hand corner, and you're going to keep doing that and just kind of like scale various parts of this. This is a very thin wall, which is why I recommend practicing this. And the reason why you want to practice this outside of Apex for a little while is that when you're in a gunfight, you're always going to be way too stressed out in a gunfight to really like apply this logic. But if you apply it here and you can do it without thinking, you can just kind of vibe, kind of just climb on stuff, you're going to be much more calm and in the moment when you actually need to scale a building. You can do this on World's Edge, you can do this on various parts of pretty much anything. If you think about it, you can try to scale it. And that's kind of the beauty behind it. So if you say, okay, oh, I'm getting away from a gunfight, I need to just keep climbing, and you can think about all little things that you can climb and just keep scaling, And if you need to get to a really weird spot, let's say like there was a ledge here and you just can't get over, then you just climb a little bit and you bounce over. There's many different ways that you can spin this so you can get to a different unique spot to make sure that you are getting up there. So if, like on the side of a building, even as you saw there, you scale up and you bounce and then boom. You know, little things. The little things make a big difference. So again, just to recap, remember that you can utilize this input to avoid grenades. Let's see if I have a grenade. Like, so if there's one nearby and you're like, oh shoot, and you're stuck in a closed area, you can use it to get up higher. You can use it just to scale the wall, even if you drop back down. But it's really, really big to avoid much of anything. Because sometimes what happens is that you'll just get spammed with grenades and you really have nowhere to go, and you really don't, but at least you can scale a wall to minimize the damage as much as humanly possible. Do the same thing to juke people. So if somebody's chasing you and running up on you and then you're reloading and then you just need to scale the wall or do something, you can use that as well. It's kind of an out, just so you're just not standing here doing nothing. And then you can do like a quick wall bounce, short wall bounce, anything of that nature. Kind of put it in, which we have a video as well on wall bouncing. And of course the exercise itself, just scale these walls. Take your time, practice it, get comfortable. Run around. If you get comfortable with this, rest assured you're going to be a pro at climbing. I know this is a very basic guide, but I feel like once you're doing it and you got your balance going, it's more of an advanced guide in the long run, because I even see people who are really good at the game for some reason struggle with climbing. I was one of them myself until I actually took the time just to do a quick exercise like that.
Next up, let's break down how to bunny hop. Now, this is applicable to both controller and mouse and keyboard. I do have the input overlay here, but I'm gonna make sure that the tips you understand exactly what you're doing. Our first tip is that we're actually gonna be teaching this on Horizon. If you are new and a beginner to bunny hopping, Horizon is best because of her passive with increased air control and reduces fall impacts with her passive. You can bunny hop on any legend, but if you're new, I always feel it's best to teach somebody new on Horizon. You can bunny hop on any legend, but getting that momentum and practicing it and a little bit more forgiving on Horizon than other legends, but it's still very much doable on any other legend. As you go through this guide, you will understand that it's all about the consistency and theme of just momentum. You can do them forward and backwards, and today we're going to be covering as beginner and then slowly increasing it, becoming more and more advanced. Let us talk about what is a bunny hop. Well, bunny hopping goes back way in the FPS days of just kind of bouncing in place and bouncing, right? A bunny hop. So let's take a look at that in third person. So you're bunny hopping around, right? Whether you're stationary, moving around, you are bouncing around endlessly. Now, some recommendations if you're on mouse and keyboard is that bunny hopping can be easier to do if you're using the scroll wheel. So you can bind the scroll wheel from jump to down or up, whichever that you prefer, to bunny hop, right? You can do it standing in place. You can also do a bunny hop where you are as well crouching. Crouching can also help as well. The interesting part whenever you're bunny hopping is that you'll notice that I'm not pressing the forward input. Bunny hopping is gaining momentum and moving around through jumping. Now that's a very interesting part about bunny hopping. Now the another interesting part about bunny hopping is that, again, you can find this cadence and really find your groove by bunny hopping by also pressing space. It's a little harder, but if you're on controller, then you can definitely find the momentum. You'll notice the recurring theme when bunny hopping is making sure that you understand momentum and rhythm. Momentum and rhythm are going to be the key words to ensure you understand what a bunny hop is. So how do you do it? Let's go back to first person now. When bunny hopping, one of the best tips I can provide is not to really utilize anything besides a jump, and you can use the movement keys such as left and right to build momentum. You can even bunny hop by standing still. So if you're standing in a still position, bouncing up and down, you have a rhythm, and you press A or D, you'll notice all of a sudden you'll gain momentum out of nowhere. It's like, oh, I'm pushing forward, as if you have a string that's attached to you, and you can move around. This is a great way to practice this initially. Whenever you are learning just to do basic movement, bouncing around, you'll notice that all I'm doing is bounce, 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 jumping, jumping, holding A and D for direction. Even if I mess up, you can bounce in place. You'll know when you truly have mastered a bunny hop is when you're moving left and right, and you're also moving left and right with, let's say, your mouse, as well if you're on a controller, that you're having this general movement, and then once you feel that momentum, there it goes. You go flying, right? This is a bunny hop without a crouch. Now, if you're crouching, I recommend utilizing hold. So my hold key now is bound to C. If you're on controller, using claw grip can definitely help you a lot more when mastering a bunny hop. So if you're bouncing around, the same thing, you'll bounce, and this will help you gain momentum once you have it, and there you go. You'll take off and you'll start going. Now, it's all about timing. Sometimes you'll have a little bit of an extra slide, but it's all about timing it perfectly to make sure you avoid it. So you'll see it sometimes there, let's see, where it slides, and let's show the example once you go a little forward again. Once you get it, once you maintain the momentum, there it goes, you go flying. And that's when you know you got the bunny hop down. Now, let's discuss a few things that you can tie this to, such as healing. So let's discuss that now. One very popular thing to do while bunny hopping, and we're going to show this in third person so you can see that difference and explain it a little bit more, is that you can heal while bunny hopping. It's not perfect like it was back in the day, back in, let's say, Season 0 of Apex Legends, but you can slide, jump, and heal and bunny hop a little bit to maintain that momentum that we're talking about. Now, let's showcase this again, but let's say you're just doing a normal heal trying to get away. Now, if you're running away from somebody, let's say you slide, jump, and then you heal, you're kind of a bit of a sitting duck. You can move around and kind of crouch and move, have a little momentum, right? But what we're looking for here is this, and we're going to break down this movement here in a second. Bunny hopping can look very sporadic, and that's really our goal. The more the sporadic the movement is, the person trying to hit you may guess incorrectly of where you're trying to go. And it can help you build a little more momentum. Instead of cutting the corner slowly, you can slide, jump, and bounce around a little bit. And if you lose the full momentum, you can gain it back like we discussed earlier. But you can also, if you do it correctly, maintain a bit of momentum until the heal is over. So let's break down now, again, now that you understand the visual part of this, what this movement and how you master it. So what you're doing breaking down is immediately a slide jump. Now, while you're in the air, you want to make sure you have the keybind that you're using for heal. In this example, I'm pressing E. So what you want to do while you slide jump, while you're in the air, you press heal, and then you go into the bunny hop like we were discussing earlier by crouching and hitting that bunny hop over and over again. What you're doing is tying two things together here. You're tying the heal with the bunny hop. Let's showcase that again and discuss it. Now, what you can do is also slide jump and then press heal, but don't have to press a crouch afterwards and still complete a bunny hop. I think the crouch makes it look a little bit more overwhelming, and you can have that bit of a slide of momentum after the fact. So you can use it or not, but I'm just using this as an example and showcasing a third person just so you know what your personal preference is. But remember that momentum can be practiced using it without a crouch, or you can use it with a crouch. This is the bunny hop heal that is so vital, and while it's just a little bit more, it can go a really long way. One of the best tips anybody can give you for movement on Apex Legends is be aware of your surroundings, when the terrain goes up or when it goes down, and how to build momentum. A bunny hop heal is no different, and one of the most important tips when utilizing it effectively. You can still slide and then heal and keep that momentum to really keep you going, and looking for those slopes is vital. Let me show you what happens when you try to go uphill. If you try to keep this momentum going uphill, I know it seems a little silly to really cover, but any sort of slope will slow you down in building that momentum. So it's very important to keep an eye on your surroundings, looking for slopes to slide down or even move down to give you an extra little boost, even if it's dropping down a ledge or building a momentum towards any object. Your surroundings are important, which is going to lead us to our next tip now in terms of utilizing a bunny hop to other movement tech. Now, this guide is not about fatigue wall bouncing, but if you saw our guide on fatigue wall bouncing, what I want you to do is go check out that video, because this is just tying that movement tech to this, and I'll have a link down in the description down below, and I'll also have a card present earlier in the video. Now, if you bunny hop, you go into a fatigue state. Now, what you can do as you bunny hop, and let's say you're healing, is you can tie this already with an immediate wall bounce. So there is an actual benefit to using a bunny hop to throw off an opponent and tying it into a fatigue wall bounce. If you want that guide, it's down in the description down below. This is just explaining what a bunny hop can help build towards and how you can use this movement tech to lead into other movement and create a level of fluidity, kind of bouncing around rather than just going into a slide. It's another alternative to throw off your opponents. We discussed, as a reminder, the basics of understanding rhythm and momentum on Apex Legends, especially whenever you build it by bouncing up and down. You build this momentum by keeping a consistent flow when bunny hopping. The more consistent your flow, the better the bunny hop will be. Now, if you happen to slide off, if you're using crouch and you feel like you're sliding a little too much, it's all about your rhythm. And you can practice this bouncing around endlessly around here, which is why I chose this more open field to kind of get your momentum going. It's all about rhythm, momentum, and practice. Practice comes with just getting the feel for it. It definitely took me a little longer to learn, and I wanted to put this more comprehensive guide because I felt like this was able to give you a better understanding of bunny hopping and its value and how to utilize it in game with healing, as well as a fatigue wall bounce, and even what it looks like and why it's even utilized in the game. This was covered initially a strafe, but we're going to go more in depth in how to strafe like a pro. What is a basic strafe? That's what we're going to cover. The impact of weapons on a strafe, how to do a pro strafe,
Then we're going to talk about the pros and cons of doing that, like the weapon impact and the difference in your aim. And then we're going to talk about strafing to counter recoil. So let's break all these down. I have Sarah who's going to help me today, but we're going to start with what is a basic strafe. So let's start with the fundamentals of what is a strafe. In FPS games, it's very important to actually strafe so you're not a target that is standing still. Because if you're standing still, then you're pretty much a sitting duck and everyone doesn't have to really aim to really hit you. But if you're strafing left and right, like you see on screen, this is going to be a much more difficult target to hit. So in the game, the biggest velocity that you can have is 173.5 velocity units. Now, another important part, and we're going to bundle this in, is the counteracting of recoil. So when we look at the recoil of an R301 without a barrel stabilizer with a 2x, this pulls initially more to the right. Now, if you are strafing to the left and to the right, this can help you counteract the recoil. And the reason why this helps counter recoil is that you'll notice as you're strafing left and right, you have to move your mouse to counteract where the strafe is. So if I'm not controlling my mouse and I go to the left, well, then I have to move my mouse to counteract to keep it centered. And you kind of see the little bit of a jitter just to keep it in the center there overall. So if you're adding in the recoil and you're adjusting for it, and you try to land all headshots like you do right there, then it's much easier to control your recoil because you're counteracting it by still keeping your crosshair center. So this is the importance, not only just for being more difficult to hit, but the implications that it has to counter the recoil by keeping your crosshair center. So there's still an added benefit of it. Now, the next section of what we're going to talk about is also the impact of various weapons on your strafe. So if I ADS with the R301, you'll notice my movement velocity is 86.75. If I'm using the wingman, you'll notice that the strafe is 173.5, which is the same as the hip fire. So these are very important to take note of when using various weapons. And I have a full dedicated video on the velocity speed of every single weapon. I'll put it down in the description down below as a reference point. But this can be very important because your strafes, and if an enemy is trying to hit you, is going to have a much easier time if your velocity is much slower. Now let's talk about the segment of how to do a pro strafe on Apex Legends. What does that mean? It's always that sweaty movement added from the left and right movement that you're seeing and adding a crouch to your movement. Now I recommend using hold, and the reason why I recommend using hold is because it naturally will spring back as soon as you lift up the key. It's much harder to do if you do toggle because you have to constantly think about constantly pressing the key to toggle the crouch up and down, rather than just releasing the key and not having to think about it mid-fight. Now, the downside of doing a pro strafe is that you have to remember, and I'm going to showcase Sarah's POV, is that you'll see individual people, especially with the flatline. I'm going to pull out the flatline specifically for this example. Is that when you're using it, sometimes it can look really flashy, especially whenever you're doing this strafe left and right that you see. The downside of it is that you're not actually completing the full animation, but there is a pro to it, and we'll discuss that in just a second. So if I showcase that movement, I'm not going to hit Sarah, so then I can showcase the POV from her point of view, what it looks like. So if I'm shooting, the head of the character is not going all the way down unless I complete it. So while it looks really, really flashy, the head of the character, and you can confirm in your end, Sarah, right, is not really dropping that far down. To complete the full strafe to be harder to hit, you have to really complete the strafe and go all the way down and up, so the target is much more difficult to hit. Now, the reason why some pros will do this is that by jiggling up and down, the recoil has a different spread with the flatline, and by jiggling anyways, you might as well move up and down because the spray is going to be random with the hip fire. But if you do this by making your strafe too short or too small, what you're going to realize is that you're going to struggle more with your aim by just jiggling it, because you're going up and down like this. But you saw from Sarah's point of view, the strafe isn't really adding much more difficulty to your opponent, and I'm going to pepper that footage in. Now, the big thing to keep in mind is you are sacrificing accuracy for a little bit of movement to throw off your opponent. So while it does look like a sweaty strafe and can really throw off opponents, the higher MMR that you get and the better the opponent is, the more predictable that movement is going to become, because everyone is training for the same strafe. So you got to keep that in mind. So as I'm strafing up and down, it might be easier just to strafe left and right and throw them off by being in an unpredictable pattern than it is to go up and down and throw off your shot. Now, you could do this up and down movement if you complete it all the way by going up and down to make it much more difficult. You see from Sarah's POV as well here, when she's actually going up and down, the difference that it makes to actually flick and hit the shot. And that movement for landing a headshot is going to be much more difficult to hit Yes, but remember the downside of your aim. So my biggest tips and advice with discussing both the pros and cons of this strafe is to maximize your accuracy and then add in more of that movement, the duck and weave, because of how much movement or accuracy you're going to actually lose. If you're predictable and doing the same thing, and we've done so many 1v1s that if I do the same thing by going left and right, your brain is naturally going to try to keep the same movement going back and forth. You really have to think outside the box and throw your enemy off. If you know by strafing a little bit more to the left and right is going to throw them off to track a little differently, do that. Instead of being right in their face and then doing the same thing right in front of them like this. This may not get you the same movement, but having them move in a really unorthodox pattern is going to throw them off a lot more and cause them to be a lot more sweaty. It's why you'll see individuals strafe left and right, and then they'll go for like a wall bounce right after to counteract the I guess you could say recoil and then do a strafe. So try to incorporate movement and think outside the box to throw off your enemy so it's a lot more overwhelming.
Now, for something more intermediate is learning how to wall bounce. Now, let us review what we're going to be covering in today's video. Objective 1 will be why velocity is important to wall bounce, how to do a simple wall bounce, the concept behind it, the horizontal wall bounce, strafing into one, meaning going off a wall, of course, wall bounce to get ahead, its real-world application, tap strafe wall bounce, advanced wall bounce off of any object, and of course we're going to discuss the best way to practice it, and finally handle wall bounces under pressure. Let's get into it. Now, let us talk about why velocity is important when doing a wall bounce. If you do not garner enough velocity, you won't be able to do an effective wall bounce. It'll fall short a little bit. And the biggest thing to highlight is, let's say when you're walking, you'll just kind of fall short and fall in place. Now, the biggest thing is to have maximum velocity. Whenever you slide jump, you help build that velocity towards it. If you have your weapon out, your velocity that you're running at is at 260 units. When you put your gun away, you're moving at 299. So whenever you are wall bouncing, it is ideal to put away your gun and build up the maximum momentum when slide jumping in. Now, this is applicable even if you're on controller of how to do these inputs. What you need to do is slide in. I prefer to use toggle. That happens to be Z for me. Now, whenever I toggle slide, that's how I build my momentum up. And so I focus less on whenever I'm holding. My hold is on C, and I use that whenever I crouch spam fight, whenever you're fighting in a gunfight. What you want to do is you slide up into the wall, and then you don't have to have any other inputs down or held. You don't need to hold W, you need to hold any other input. All you need to do is slide towards the wall and then press jump. Now, I prefer to use the scroll wheel whenever I'm jumping just because it spams the input. You can also do this by hitting space. Sometimes it doesn't really work as well. You heard me hit the space bar a second ago there, because it's harder to pretty much time. I always tend to do my wall bounces with a scroll wheel. Easier to time, better to get it just right. And there we go, there's the space bar. So I wanted to highlight what it looks like when you do it incorrectly. Whenever you do it right, then you wall bounce. And when you do it wrong, it looks like that. Let's try it again and let's see if we can get it right. There we go, perfect. But scroll wheel is ideal. If you're on controller, this is going to be much more difficult to do because you pretty much have to spam the input and perfectly time it. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. This is a simple version of the wall bounce. I highly recommend just doing this over and over again. On a wall, you can do it on this one. You can do it on the wall over here. And just keep repeating over and over and over and over and over again. And we're going to get into the other concepts. We'll see slide, jump, and then hit jump. Again, slide, jump, hit jump again. Back up, go forward, slide, jump, and then hit jump again. Your controller, you will do toggles, jump, and then hit jump again. So you have 2 jumps, and then you have slide in. Let's now cover the more advanced topics once you get the basic concept down. Let's talk about the most famous use of the wall bounce, and that's definitely using the horizontal one. So the same action applies, but what you're going to do is you're going to hold a direction key whenever you're slide jumping. So it's the same concept, slide, jump, but this time you're going to hold A, going left, you're going to hold D to hit the wall. Once you hit the wall, that's whenever you can wall bounce. I prefer to do a tap strafe in there just to also kind of help a little bit. It can help build a little bit more momentum whenever you tap strafe it in. And of course, I use scroll wheel forward for W. That's for the tap strafe. You can also spam the input W and then wall bounce. I just did it there just as an example. But the horizontal wall bounce is very, probably the most famous use, especially when you're trying to get away from an encounter. And we'll talk about how you do that movement there in just a hot second. Now let's talk about the real world use if you were being chased, for example.
And let's pretend this was not a wall, just like a simple wall, but one that doesn't have the ability to jump over. If somebody's chasing you and trying to catch up to you, wall bouncing ahead can really help you get away and build momentum to be harder to hit rather than running in a straight line. The options that you have in this scenario is you can kind of just strafe around, but the problem is that you start to lose momentum. The easier application is to wall bounce and get away. I do this all the time when I'm playing in matches, and it really helps immensely. The only downside is if you mess up your wall bounce like it did right there, then you will pretty much be stuck in place. You want to make sure that you're optimizing the jump and that you go over the wall. And I'm going to show you the advanced version of how to do a wall bounce of what happens when you get stuck right here. I'm going to show that to you in a hot second, so it's good that I made that mistake there. But essentially, whenever you're doing this and trying to get away, the key binds that you're pressing are very important to be able to get you at a dodge. And there you go, that's a really good one. So wall bouncing, get it ingrained into you, make sure you feel comfortable with it because it's going to get you out of a lot of nasty situations. And let's talk about how, and there's another good one right there, and whenever you have the velocity. And the reason why, if you're looking at somebody who bounces away, it's much harder to hit them than they were if they were just simply running in a straight line forward. And you have the zigzag option. Now let's segue to discuss how you wall bounce over a wall. Okay, let's tap strafe over a wall now. So it's the same application. You slide jump, and then you use that wall bounce, and you kind of like strafe right into it. So let's do that again. You do slide jump, wall bounce, and then you can use the tap strafe to help you. So you use the W forward on the scroll wheel, but you want to make sure, just like any wall bounce, that you're redirecting. So slide jump, I'm holding A, and then you bounce over. This is really probably the biggest application that's going to help you get over a wall, because if you have somebody who's climbing over, like so, sometimes it can be a little harder for them to catch up to you, especially if you're wall bouncing in the air and you're cutting the angle so short. Let's do that again. So what it looks like, you slide jump, you hold A, and then you pretty much can tap strafe into it just a little bit. Kind of helps you cut the angle. Kind of do it out of a bit of habit now. But that is how you bounce over the wall. So a good place to practice it. And just keep going back and forth over the wall. Now let's talk about the next topic. Now what we're going to discuss is how you tap strafe wall bounce. So what this looks like is tap strafing sharp around a corner and wall bouncing like so. Whenever you normal tap strafe, you're pretty much pressing W while holding the direction that you would like to go. If you don't tap strafe, you have a larger arc, and it's really difficult to cut the angle and cut the corner. That's the example right there. Holding A, but it's not enough to cut the corner, cut the angle. It's not simple just pressing A. Kind of helps a little bit, but spamming W and holding A really makes the angle really sharp. So it gives you that nice horizontal angle, which helps you go into the wall bounce. So what I'm doing is the same application just as we did building on the basics. You slide jump, cut the corner, and then you jump. You don't have to have any inputs whenever you jump. You can definitely do them, it still works. But then you cut the corner and then you wall bounce out. This is the real world application for this scenario would be if you are cutting a wall. You want to be super sharp around it. I hit a weird lag spike there. You want to be super sharp around the corner and wall. And then you wall bounce over to get you, let's say if maybe there was a rock here or something along the lines to help you get away. Just remember, if you do this, that if they do cut the corner, you're going to be out in the open here. So you're just going to have to keep booking it and running, and then you can keep wall bouncing out. This is a great way to practice it though. Keep cutting these angles. And when you actually have the wall, trust me, it gets even easier to do. That is how to do a tap strafe into a wall bounce. A really sharp one. I think that's probably the most difficult version that you're going to do. Anything else, now once you start even doing a very simple tap strafe into it, it'll become a lot easier and sharper to help you build a lot of momentum. The momentum that you build from a tap strafe wall bounce is pretty strong and really cool. Now let's talk about the next topic. Now this next one is going to be very interesting. In my prior guide, I had always highlighted how important it was to make sure you're not pressing any inputs on for a wall bounce. I have learned recently, whenever I was just kind of messing around in a private server, testing things out, the biggest thing that you kind of run into that's really important is if you hold a direction that you can wall bounce really effectively off of even any surface and object. I've been watching a lot of players 1v1 specifically when utilizing this, and you can tell that I'm doing this almost probably like 8 out of 10 times. I usually still sometimes make a mistake and the wall bounce is a little short, just like that one. But normally, if you do a normal wall bounce, like a slide jump like this, you'll notice that it's not as effective.
And the reason why it's not as effective is because your character is trying to go into a climbing animation. It thinks that you want to hold W and that you want to climb over the wall, so you get stuck like this. The same thing happens on surfaces like this as well. So if I were to slide jump against this surface here, the same scenario would apply. But what I have learned and what I'm teaching today is that if you hold either A or D as you're sliding into this object, it erases that animation. You're tricking the game into thinking that you are effectively, you're telling the game you do not want to climb. And because you do not want to climb, it makes it much easier. Otherwise, if you do not, and you see my hand is not on the keyboard, you go through the climbing animation. So you're probably wondering how they always do these crazy, interesting wall bounces off of objects that are very difficult to do it. That is how they do it. You can even do it on objects that are pretty much more difficult than normal. An example would be even this section right here. This is very hard to wall bounce off of. It doesn't really work as effectively. But what you can do is wall bounce off of it as long as you're holding A and D as you're sliding into it. It's the same, we're just adding building blocks onto this. You're pretty much slide jumping, and if you don't hold A or D, you saw when I let go of it on my keyboard there, it messes it up. But if I hold D, when you see, you got to feel the tug. What this looks like whenever you slide jump, you'll see your character just kind of tugs a little bit. This is without a tap strafe. That tug is what gives you the ability to do an effective wall bounce. And there you go. It pretty much works, I want to say 9 out of 10 times. In game, you're just going to have to get used to knowing when to time it off of geometry. You can even do it off of weird objects like this one. See if it works. There you go. Realistically, if you did a normal wall bounce off of this, it doesn't really work. It messes up and it goes to the climbing animation. Same thing can be said on an object over here on the left side as well. You can wall bounce off of this, but if you do a normal wall bounce, you go through the climbing animation. Let's talk about an advanced application now of using this wall bounce off of an object that maybe somebody who's not at advanced would struggle with. I'm going to wall bounce off of this object, and I'm going to fly over the wall here on the right. You slide jump, you hold it. All right, so now let's talk about a real world application of potentially using the wall bounce off of a smaller object. And this works on a lot of things. It works on cars that you otherwise can't wall bounce off. Anything that you get stuck in a climbing animation that otherwise would be impossible to wall bounce off of. Again, the application is you have to have momentum when sliding. So we're going to slide jump, and then you're going to climb that right there. If somebody was chasing you, it can be a little bit more elegant if you wall bounce effectively off of it. But if somebody's chasing you, one, it would be harder for them to shoot you. And to replicate the movement, it would be a lot more difficult to do it. I'm going to showcase whenever I did it better earlier. I was doing a coaching session. I met a really, really great friend and got to practice this a lot more. But this is the most probably advanced uses that you're going to get out of hitting an object that is otherwise harder to wall bounce off of. I'm going to showcase that footage here now. I might actually have recorded this. This is such a great spot because like you wall bounce above off of something small
as well.
Yeah, you should be able to. There you go. Look at that. Look at that. That's so clean.
Oh,
like if somebody's
dude, that is
chasing
awesome.
you, somebody's chasing you, this is an easy way to get out. If you find a small object, because they would have to execute like that, a flawless wall bounce just to get away. It's really nice.
Yeah. And if they're chasing you, I mean, they would have to do like the climbing animation or...
Yeah, like if they screwed it up and they didn't know how to do this wall bounce, they would essentially end up accidentally climbing, or they would have to go like this over the wall and try to climb to you. They could, in theory, do the wall bounce like this, off the corner and do like a tap strafe back into it. But even then, you're going to get stuck in a climbing animation if you hit the rock right here. So yeah,
you're still losing time there.
Very niche, but if done well, stuff like that, because of holding A and D, it makes a really big difference.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know you could jump off of things that low. Cause it's that climbing animation always gets stuck, you know?
Yeah. Okay, now what we're going to highlight is how to best practice a wall bounce. We're going to circle back to the beginning of the video and talk about just simply slide jumping and hitting the object back and forth over and over again is the best way to do it. Now remember the advanced technique that I taught you where you actually hold A and D and when to apply it and when not to apply it. Now, part 2 of this is understanding how to wall bounce whenever you're being shot at and under pressure. Usually whenever you are shot, you initially get a slow, and there is a slow, but afterwards you're pretty much free to build up your velocity and movement. So
Practice this while you're being shot at and get your armor over and over again. If you can do this while being shot at, and there's a slow, and then you can slide jump right after, that is how you perfect this wall bounce and become more of an advanced player. Because after you're shot, that's when you can build the momentum. Once you're above around, let's say 230, is whenever you can effectively wall bounce and build momentum. Anything under, I want to say 200 velocity is where you're going to struggle in building that movement and really succeeding. So keep practicing this. Have these target dummies shoot at you. I have a guide as well how to make them shoot at you in the description down below, so be sure to check out that very quick guide. This is very simple to do to get them to shoot at you. But for those that are newcomers that are saying, how do I apply this in game? Every time I do it, I make the mistake. I don't have enough velocity. This is how you do it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and that is how you wall bounce on Apex Legends. Hopefully you found this guide helpful. Hopefully it's a lot more structured and organized compared to my prior video. I definitely want to help you guys out, and hopefully the advanced thing about wall bouncing off of any object is very helpful to you guys. So you saw the wall bounce there whenever I did it right, and then you saw it, let's see, you guys, whenever you just try to do a normal wall bounce, how it gets stuck.
As we continue to take things up a notch from the standard wall bounce and applying by learning a fatigue wall bounce, let's get into it. The most interesting about this movement tech is that it took me a really long time to really understand, because I'm going to be very blunt, I'm not probably the smartest person when it comes to movement tech, but I'm confident that when you step away from this video, you're going to learn how to do it, and it's actually really, really easy. And I'm going to prove it right now. So let's start with the concept of what a fatigue wall bounce is. A fatigue wall bounce is literally in its name, meaning that after you keep bouncing, you lose that momentum, but also helps towards a bunny hop. So a regular jump, you jump higher. After you continuously jump, you're not jumping as high anymore, but there is a benefit to this. Now, if you want an updated bunny hop guide, comment down below as well. I know we haven't done one in quite some time. Now, a fatigue wall bounce, when you're against a wall, if you do just a regular bounce off the wall, you get shot down like this. Now, when you do regular bunny hop up, or, you know, wall bounce off the wall, and you do it correctly, and then you bounce up in the air and go up. And that takes a little bit of momentum like this to wall bounce. Now, if you want a wall bounce guide, I have one down in the description down below. If you want an updated one, let me know as well. Now, for this sake, just a regular bounce against the wall will push you down, right? Now, what we're going to do is when you fatigue and you do a wall bounce, you have a small window here where you can do a wall bounce. I want to say it's about 1.5 seconds approximately. Don't quote me exactly on that. But the beauty of this, and you're probably asking where this is applicable, if you want to really work on a fatigue wall bounce, just do a little bunny hop, scroll wheel, and if you're on controller, this is definitely a movement tech that's a little more comfortable on controller as well, because it doesn't require spamming a ton of inputs. But if you can wall bounce a controller, then you can wall bounce effectively in-game with using a fatigue. So if you're bunny hopping and you go towards the wall, you know, bunny hop, and then wall bounce afterwards, you'll notice your character is doing almost a bit of a climb. Now, you can really get fancy with this and do an infinite wall bounce, which is why I kind of chose this wall. So you wall bounce, and then you keep pretty much going into a flow where you are constantly. Now, you see the inputs on screen there. You'll notice that I'm kind of always like letting go immediately and on the W and climbing either using A or D to keep the momentum going. This is great if you're trying to run away from somebody, or if you are reloading your guns, or if you're in a situation near a door, is another great example of how you can use this. Because you might be, you know, let's say you're throwing down your ult, you bounce around, you pull out your shotgun, you're reloading, and you're bouncing around. It's great for keeping that momentum, especially whenever you lose it. So even though you've lost momentum, you can fatigue wall bounce and do a quick bunny hop, and then you're kind of right back in the action. So let's take this back down to basics here of how to do a fatigue. A regular bounce, whenever you bounce down, it'll go like that. And you can climb for a little bit. We're going to talk about how you can do a delayed fatigue wall bounce that can really juke your opponents. So when you do a regular one, you'll bounce down. If you do a regular slide jump into the wall, you'll bounce up. Now, when you fatigue, to get this right next to a wall, and you'll bounce up. But you want to use A and D, and you don't want to keep pressing forward. You want to pretend you're about to climb, and that timing right there is pretty important. Now, another thing you can do, because the climbing does allow you still in the fatigue state, what you can do is create a fatigue wall bounce, but then climb for a second and then bounce off. Now, this can really throw off your opponents and almost kind of acts as like a little bit of a wall run as you're doing this, like that. And that can throw off your opponents just to say, oh, where am I going? Oh, just kidding. And really trick them and have them miss their shots. So that's the point of movement, is to really have opponents miss their shots. And if you tie this together with a lot of other movement tech, let's say you know how to do a tap strafe, you do a RAS tap strafe, and then you fatigue wall bounce, it's perfect. So again, the checklist of when you can use this is after a tap strafe and you bunny hop afterwards and then bounce away. During a reload, let's say you do a bit of a spray and then you jump in the air and then fatigue wall bounce right afterwards. Just kind of bounce and do a little bit of a strafe left and right, and add a little bit of a tap strafe. You can add a tap strafe into this and get really clever. And you can use this movement tech as well. There's a point in Olympus where you can be near a structure and then fatigue wall bounce and then bounce up and move forward. Now let's learn how to tap strafe. Let's deep dive.
What we're gonna do is help you understand what it is visually. Then we're gonna go into MS Paint to where I can show you it also in a different visual way. Then we're gonna understand why tap strafing is important and how it can benefit your gameplay. So real quick, we're gonna do, and I have the inputs on the upper right-hand screen so you can see me overall move with my mouse. So obviously whenever you slide jump and then you just arc, you can hit the A key and kind of bounce around. I'm showcasing this in third person. What a tap strafe does for you is whenever you slide and do the same thing, is obviously you can go more into a direction that you want to go and you can make a harder turn. This obviously can't occur whenever you're just doing a regular side jump. Your character gets limited overall on its movement. So let's showcase that again one more time. Slide jump and I press A, right? You can consider that a little bit of a tap strafe. You're just trying to move in that general direction. So we're going to do it again, but we're going to tap strafe this time. You get a very hard turn on your character. So if we look at this visually again, and then we're going to go into first person. I want to showcase it there, and then we're going to break down how to do it. I just want you to understand the visual. So if you slide and then jump, you have yourself a little bit of a pull. It's almost like the movement is stopping. It feels like it's hard, I guess the best word, gated. But once you use a tap strafe, it almost feels like there's an extra mobility that you have with your character. And the reason I'm showcasing it on Horizon is because she quite literally has the best air movement and directional pull. So I'm using her as a visual example. So let's segue real quick to the MS Paint version of this, just to get a better understanding, we'll say better twice, of how you tap strafe. And then I'm going to switch over to first person and showcase it as well. And then we're going to go over all the inputs. Okay, I wanted to showcase just a visual representation in Paint, just so you understand. I'm going to do third person, first person. I want you guys to really understand this concept, that whenever you just slide jump initially, you'll have just this normal movement, right? You're going to do an arc. Now the same thing happens whenever you tap strafe, but now you have a heavier arc. And you can even get that arc at the start to bounce a certain direction. So that when you tap strafe, depending on how far you want to go, whenever you're using a scroll wheel, this is important to understand because that's your visual representation on screen there. Okay, let's segue right back to the video. So now just some quick pickup footage. I wanted to remind those that are on controller that unfortunately this is almost virtually impossible to do on controller. It's definitely is possible. The inputs required, this is why you have scroll wheel to really push you a certain direction, can be very, very difficult to do. And it may not be necessary. Now, the reason why this is helpful for controller players to know is when you see a PC player using a tap strafe, especially when it's in combat and moving around, you understand what their movement is and what they're capable of, especially what type of player that you're dealing with, essentially. You can even do it as a hard counter to move a different direction. The idea, again, with a tap strafe is that you're using it to keep forward momentum. Whenever you don't tap strafe, what you'll notice with that momentum is that it just stops and then you just kind of freeze. You lose your speed, and you don't want to lose your speed, you want to gain your speed. Now, just to break down tap strafing, and you can incorporate this into many different abilities such as a wall bounce, but what I'm going to showcase right here, and I'll showcase an example of it later and you can see the inputs and we'll break those down individually, is you move forward, you slide, and jump. But of course what you want to do is hit your peak in the movement, so you maximize on that. So again, you slide, jump once you hit your peak, and that's your fastest mobility that you're going to have. So once we rinse and repeat it, you're going to incorporate a direction, whether it's A or D, depending on where you would like to go. So in this situation, we're going to use A, but I'm not incorporating the full tap strafe quite yet. So what we're going to do in terms of the tap strafe now is we're going to slide, jump, hold A, and then use your scroll wheel, to garner that momentum. So that is what you call a tap strafe, as you're seeing me bounce back and forth here. Now, why do I use scroll wheel? Again, you can use your W key and spam it afterwards. It's just a little bit easier. As you can tell, it works when you just hit your W key and spam it. I prefer scroll wheel because it just spams the input. And I keep hitting the wall just because I'm tap strafing a little bit too hard onto the wall, as you saw there. But again, you can use W immediately, as you saw. I just feel it's a little bit more elegant to use your scroll wheel. So what I've done, let's go to settings, go to mouse and key. I have actually put my forward key on the up scroll wheel, as you can see here. Now again, you can just use your regular W key to make this movement effective. It's a little bit harder to time. Not really, but it's just what do you feel most comfortable with. And for me, the scroll wheel is just a little bit easier. Now the reason why this is harder to do on controller is that you have to spam the up input when you're moving, so that's why I say it's a little bit virtually impossible to do on a controller. But if you understand this movement and how somebody's doing it, again, a regular slide, you just see how the angle, it's just harder to move around the corner without a tap strafe, despite me holding A and getting my mouse over there. But the minute you incorporate a tap strafe, it's like, oop, you're right over there, and you keep that same speed and momentum, and it's really nice and clean, especially when you're cutting corners and avoiding gunfire from somebody. You'll just get around the corner, you'll save yourself some of that extra damage if you're getting lasered, and it just makes the world of a difference. So let's discuss why tap strafing is important and why it's helpful and beneficial. Again, if you have further questions in the comment section down below, we can talk about that as well. But why tap strafing is so beneficial is that it helps you cut a corner or cut an angle at a much faster pace compared to an enemy. So here's another real world example, is that you'll instantly just cut a corner if somebody's chasing you. So if you use it all the time in your movement, it'll help you dodge gunfire. But if you're moving around, you can cut easily around a corner more effectively. So let's say somebody's shooting at me, wants to hit maximum momentum, and then I cut the corner and then dodge. Rather than, here's the other example without a tap strafe of what that looks like. So you'll slide, you kind of have a little bit of a hard pull. You're trying, but you feel a little bit slower. That extra mobility just makes you a lot harder to hit, especially when recoil is introduced into the game, to where you can dodge gunfire and be a lot more mobile whenever moving. So just to showcase what a bunny hop can do, the more airtime you have, the more effective your bunny hop can be. So obviously what you want to do whenever you're bunny hopping is the more momentum you have, you'll slide, you'll jump, you'll bounce, and then use a tap strafe, bounce, bounce, use a tap strafe, bounce, bounce, tap strafe, bounce, 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 tap strafe, just to kind of give you some mobility as you're mid-air. It's a little harder to do whenever you're just doing a normal wall bounce. You have a little bit less time, obviously, to time the bunny hop with the tap strafe, since you're already kind of having momentum left and right. So I say the more real world applications, whenever you have a little bit of forward momentum, whenever you're sliding down somewhere and you tap strafe into a bunny hop, or vice versa. Now I know I showcased a tap strafe to a wall bounce, so what you want to do is slide jump and tap strafe and then hit the wall. This is a little bit harder to time, so if you jump, slide, tap strafe, and then wall bounce right after, you can get yourself a little bit more forward momentum. It's a little bit harder to time, naturally. So you'll slide, jump, kind of screwed it up there, and you'll tap strafe right into the wall, and then wall bounce right after. Again, what you'll notice whenever I wall bounce, especially what I've done in the tutorial, as mentioned before, you will slide jump into a wall, and then bounce right off of it. You don't need to press any keys, you're just, all that at that point is forward momentum. And of course, I'll add this a little extra into the video, but people were asking, because it kind of incorporates into the tap strafe and understanding it, whenever you slide jump, you can use your A key to wall bounce. It's kind of somebody mentions an advanced wall bounce, but I don't really think it is. It's the same application. You're technically kind of tap strafing by using A. You're tapping into the wall. It's not a full tap strafe because you're not using your scroll wheel or W key, but what you're doing, and it's effectively how it ties into this wall bounce that I just discussed, is you slide jump, press A, and then you wall bounce after. Notice how all I'm using is my scroll wheel in terms of the overall input. And if I do it one more time, I think it helps visually to understand. And this is how you get that wall bounce specifically, a little bit more advanced as you're running away. Because realistically, whenever you wall bounce, you're not always going to be just running right towards the wall and wall bouncing over. You're most likely going to be running away from an individual, and then you're just going to want to wall bounce and get that momentum and be a little bit harder to hit.
What we're going to do now is we're going to take the tap strafe to the next level and learn a double tap strafe.
So now we've gotten the introduction out of the way, let's discuss why. Why is this movement important? Well, we know a normal tap strafe, when you cut a corner, it's a sharper angle, right? You have a sharp angle and it's unpredictable and harder to track because the movement is very sporadic, just like we did right there. Now, a double tap strafe is a movement where you kind of essentially create an angle and then essentially go right back on track. So why is this important? Why is this harder to track? Well, because if you ever do anything like aim training, Kovacs, aim lab, anything of that nature, you will realize just how hard it is to hit a target that is moving sporadically. And when that happens, when you see it from a third-person perspective, you realize even from a basic lobby, going from bronze to just starting out the game to even an advanced lobby of trying to track somebody with that movement, how difficult it is. So what I'm going to do first is continue to teach it in third person here. Then I'm going to turn on these bots and I'm going to move around and showcase what happens. Now remember, very quick tip, when you're double tap strafing, this is a great maneuver to get away, but also to close the gap, especially when you're using a shotgun to get close range. So what do I mean when I say that? Well, so remember that whenever you're hit with a bullet, unless you are a big boy like Gibraltar or Caustic, not to be shot. Because whenever you get shot, you lose some of your momentum. Also, be sure you have your maximum slide to maximize on the tap strafe. You can do a small tap strafe, very, very little. Or, as you do this, really throw off your enemy, you can even do a bigger one, like you saw right there. So now let's discuss the inputs that I'm hitting. You can do this left to right or right to left. You can even add, if you're a high movement character, or even if you're in the air, slide jumping somewhere from far, you can even turn this into a triple tap strafe. You can just kind of keep jiggling back and forth. Just remember your momentum and how much you're going to lose. It's just to throw off your enemy because the hitbox or the person looks like they're moving one direction, they instantly shift. So the inputs, you slide jump, pretty straightforward initially, and just like a normal tap strafe, you tap strafe and you use your scroll wheel to the angle. Now that is my biggest recommendation, is to utilize the scroll wheel because it's by far the easiest way to get the input. It's interesting that we call this a new movement tech, just to highlight this. I really feel like this movement has been in the game, and I feel like I've been doing this for a really long time. I just never really thought that I was doing it. I call this a redirect. Even Asu, when he posted his guide, he's always called this a redirect movement, kind of adopted the fact of calling it a tap strafe. So now that we covered against slide jump and then tap strafe with the scroll wheel, what you're going to do is add in quickly while you're mid-air. You got the tap strafe and go back to the right. So you see what I did? I actually don't even have my finger anymore on the W key. I am using all my forward momentum, A and then D, and scroll wheel whenever I switch directions. If you can do a normal tap strafe, you can do a double. And it's not perfect every time. It's easier to do whenever you're a movement character, especially whenever you're slide jumping off an angle. You see where the angle is this weird little L shape, if you will. Almost like a horse from chess, you know, in their movement. It's like this weird L. But it's good to do because it overthrows your enemy and it throws them off. So again, you know, you tap A and then you tap D. You don't have to hold W anymore. It's all about the scroll wheel and the two keys once you're up in the air. Now, let's do this from a first-person perspective, and I'm going to hop in and showcase whenever you're dodging bullets and how much easier and cool it can be. Okay, now what we're going to do is showcase this movement from a first-person perspective. When you see that L that I literally just did right there, actually, and you're fighting these bots. So when you're moving up on them, I do this all the time, and it's great movement. See how you're dodging? They have these bullets. That's not the best tap strafe. There we go. That's a good one right there. Very nice. Whenever you're moving up on an enemy and you juke them, how much you dodge the bullets. I mean, these are bots, right? And it's not exactly perfect fighting a bot, but you can get used to the movement whenever they hit you and realize how much it slows you down. So if I'm moving, ready, when I get shot, let's see if they can hit me. There we go. See how it just instantly slows you just a little bit? There's a slow again. So whenever you have that slow, remember that you have to get the slide jump, making sure you don't get hit by a bullet or the tap strafe. Here we go. There we go. Perfect. So I got hit initially, but once I did, I made sure to build back my momentum so I can slide jump. So that's really the key. So I know a lot of people in the comment sections reply, well, what happens when, how come I'm losing my movement? I'm losing my momentum whenever I'm sliding. Well, a major tip, even if you get hit, if you have the velocity in the upper left-hand corner, I'll put the command in the description down below, is of course, yeah, you can get hit and get a little bit slowed by a bullet. Let's see, the shotgun hits me. Ready? Hit me, bot. No, they're going to miss. That's fine. But you do see the indicator whenever you do get hit, kind of get this little jerk. You'll have your movement slow just a tad. It happens more with the heavy guns, and there was a little bit of a slow right there. They're slowing me. And then you can just tap strafe away. This is great practice, especially whenever you're trying to learn the tap strafe movement. This is the advanced version of getting used to the movement. And there we go. That's a nice one. It's pretty decent. And that's how you do it.
This one's a bit more advanced. This one's more specific when it comes to Octane and applying a tap strafe. Big shout out to Zuni for discovering the level of detail that you can do with this jump pad. He really taught this to Marianas, and while we were spending lots of time together yesterday breaking down this mechanic, and Zuni was taking it all to new heights for us. I got their socials in the description down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into it. So real quick, let's start from the beginning. Now we all know about a single tap strafe when you get your second bounce. You bounce and you tap strafe. You see this example here in the background. But what if you could tap strafe right when you hit the jump pad and continue to move like this? Without punching, without losing momentum, and really confusing your enemy with sharp directional turns. I've seen lots of variations of this using the jump pad, but I really want to break it down, all the inputs for everyone to understand to help you build consistency when using your jump pad. Because I had a bit of an understanding before, but my perspective on this has changed immensely. This is the explanation that helped me first understand the mechanic. This is courtesy of Marianas.
Okay, Pog. Okay, listen. You're gonna slide at it, your fingers off. I didn't even hit W there. That was just A. Okay. As I'm hitting the pad, I'm hitting the input key and space at the exact same time, like a regular strafe.
Oh.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the first
And
step.
now you still have
Holy.
your strafe
So if you do it fast enough, you can like
that.
I was missing the jump in it. We are unsure how easy, again, this is to use on controller, or if it's possible because you need to use a tap strafe. For those on controller, this is an important mechanic to understand to counter, as this movement is going to be utilized for those that are on PC. This is an advanced technique, so please be sure to watch how to tap strafe just so you understand what is necessarily happening, but we're still going to break down those mechanics. Let's go again, breaking this down to its bare form. See how Zuni moves towards the jump pad? Usually you punch to go backwards, but look how his momentum is not lost. This is what I mean with the first tap strafe, and notice how he does not lose his second jump. Then we see the potential of using this in any direction. Let us break down what I'm doing here whenever I go into a sharp angle. You want to input your forward and slide into the jump pad. Right before you go into the jump pad, release the forward input and tap the direction you want to go, meaning using A, D, or S on your keyboard, combined with pressing jump simultaneously. Now this input should all happen syncing once you hit the jump pad. Anticipate the sound and sync, and it all happens at the same exact time. Then you can utilize your scroll wheel to help you stray further in that direction and curve. The tap strafe at the end, once you get your directional change, needs to wait for just a moment or you will lose your double jump. I notice that a lot, and sometimes you don't even need to use the tap strafe. Once you get the directional change at the start, you don't need the curve if you don't want it. The description is similar in execution as the super jump. You're providing a bulk of new inputs to the game, which causes this to happen, very much like, again, zipline super jump. But the jump pad essentially registers a new direction last second and lets you maintain the second jump as if it was a last second change. This is all a timing thing. If you miss time with audio of the jump pad, you won't divert into a new direction. If you do it incorrectly, you're just going to go forward. You could lose your second jump, or you're just going to lose all momentum and just kind of stagnate in place. Now, why is this so huge? It's because really the benefit of getting so creative. Like the clip at the start, you see interesting flutters, curves, full spins, turns, and extremely sharp new directions, especially whenever you're trying to boost yourself up. Everything has to do with timing, which provides a level of flexibility, and being Octane, being such a popular legend, you're going to see jump pads a whole lot more, and always tons more. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So today's guide, I want to talk briefly how you do a super jump on the zipline on Apex Legends. We're going to discuss inputs really quick. On my inputs, I move my interact key from E to F. There's no personal preference here, but you have to hit it simultaneously when you jump. You can do this by hitting spacebar and F, obviously whenever you time it correctly, or you can use scroll wheel. Obviously the scroll wheel is very infamously overpowered, so it's a lot easier to time. You can also do this on a zipline whenever you're running towards it. You don't have to jump right away. All you need to do is as you're moving towards the zip, you see I press F, and then I press my scroll wheel, and then boom, I am skyrocketed into the air. You can obviously do this in controller. The input is the same. You just have to press those buttons simultaneously at the same exact time to make sure that you get the super jump on the zip line. So I figured I'd do a little quick tutorial on it.
Now, this is more advanced, but how to mantle jump is our next topic.
All right, everybody, this video is sponsored by EA. So that movement that I just did right there, that's what we're going to be teaching is a mantle jump. This is probably the easier version to do right here, but we're going to highlight it in some more complicated areas and discuss why they're trickier. But first, I want to break down this movement tech and really break it down so then everyone can understand. I've seen a lot of guides on YouTube, and what's interesting, let's showcase why I'm also covering this. This was actually showcased in an Apex Legends trailer. So the footage right here that you're about to see is a mantle jump that was utilized in a trailer. I thought that was awesome, and we can go recreate that exact movement, and I want to show you how you do it and break it down, and we're going to go into empty servers. So thank you for EA for supplying that server, and hopefully can teach you guys this awesome movement tech. The reason why I'm breaking it down in my own words is I always felt it was a little, I've seen a lot of guides and I felt like they were a little overcomplicated, and then when I finally was able to essentially dumb it down for me to understand, I'm trying to share it because then, I mean, if I can do it, I think anybody can, because I'm not necessarily always the most gifted or talented individual. So essentially, we break down this movement tech, and we're going to showcase it going back and forth. And, you know, the better you get at it, the more reliable you can be on doing it. So practice makes perfect. So let's break down this movement tech and understand how this works from the ground up. Now, the first line of movement that anybody does is that, you know, you get on the zip line. The movement that you're doing whenever you're at the top of the zip line is essentially a super zip line jump. That is, if you're using it, and I don't have my overlay here because I want you to understand this is more of like universal. What you're trying to do here is you hit interact and you press jump at the same exact time. If you are on mouse and keyboard, this is a lot easier to do because you can time that, right? Now, the reason I'm highlighting this is that once you're up here, you want to be holding the ledge. So once you hold the ledge, I'm going to showcase this now in third person and why this movement tech works. I think when you understand the why, this will click very much for you. So you climb up, and if you do this in slow motion and you back up just a little bit, your character will float. So what you're doing is tricking the game whenever you look down. So I'm going to go back into first person so you can see this, where the game then thinks that you're still floating, and therefore you can still do this movement tech slower and has to be a bit fast in timing of where your body is essentially suspended in air so you can do a super zip line jump forward. Now, the timing of this is different depending on the ledge because you have to look down, and having some momentum does help it become a lot more consistent. And then afterwards, you can add a lot more flair and a lot more movement to this. And then once you do it right, then it clicks and you can fence, do a lot more stuff. You can tap strafe off of it. You know, a lot of more fancy movement tech things. So let's break this down again. You zip up. You want to be on the ledge right here and you hold it. As you're climbing, you want to back up just a little bit, but as you're backing up, you want to look down so you can look at the zip line. You can also look up, because when you look up, you can also grab the zip line. See how you have the little prompt there? Essentially, you're looking to look down so you can grab the prompt. And the faster you do it, or you have a flow to it, the more successful you're going to be with this mantle jump. So one more time, you zip up, you have the ledge. The timing of this is important. If you want to break this down further, what I would do is constantly stop and grab. Go up, stop and grab. Go up, stop and grab. And then work on the other two part after the fact once you get this, because then you can just piece it together and time it and work on it. If you change sensitivities, it doesn't kind of change the timing and flow a little bit, because you do need to look down at a precise time. Now, there are ledges that we have here that are not as easy to do because you don't necessarily end it and then it automatically climbs. So the timing of this is a little harder and a lot faster. So that's where that timing is just a little bit more difficult just to master. And that's okay. We you know, it's just a thing that you have to practice and work on. What we're going to do now is I'm going to go to World's Edge and look at the most difficult one to master and discuss why that is so hard and why the timing of it is just a little bit different. But remember, it's all about grabbing that ledge and then looking down and then looking down and then looking down and trying to make sure you get the prompt, or look up, depending on which one. I do believe that most people have said looking up is easier, but for my brain, unfortunately, looking down just makes a little bit more sense. By moving up, I always tend to get the the timing wrong, and I just can't throw my... Pulling down is just a little bit easier for me to do it. Now, what we're going to do, let's go in the custom server, and let's highlight World's Edge, where the timing is a little more difficult. And what happens on those timings is that your head actually hits, and you actually have to pull down a little bit more. So it's a little more tricky. Let's break that down, and let's segue now. Now, it's very interesting whenever you hit these areas. There's different movement tech, but I'm just going to keep it for the most simplistic one. A lot of people who know advanced movement will watch this, but this whole purpose of this video is that it's more for, you know, the average person, well, I guess like myself, to try to understand this movement tech. Now, the trickier part with this is how much faster this is. Now, when you mistime this one, and then you don't time it right, you either, you know, you fall, and then you, well, of course, now I'm getting all the timing right. Come on, Daz, do it incorrectly. You hit the top of that exit sign when you do it incorrectly. I've done this one so many times that I'm trying to, like, get it. You can also kind of, like, edge it over, which I'm trying to do incorrectly. There we go. You kind of like pause in place because you're hitting the upper part of the sign. Notice that my dip is a little bit lower, and there we go. See where it's like, the dip has to be a little lower or else you hit the top of the sign. So the timing is a lot stricter on this. There we go. And it has a certain flow and a feel to it for it to really work. So again, reminder, I'm going to keep repeating it many times, is that when you practice this, you stop and you hit the ledge. And you want to be able to, when you hit the ledge, to climb it. And then you climb up and you look down and then you bounce by looking down. So let's break down that movement one last time. You hold, you climb, but also simultaneously backing up a little bit so you kind of fall. Or that, remember when you're suspended in air, that moment when you're suspended, right? And then you have to get the zip line, whether you look up or down, and you hit it, and then you press that super zip line jump, right? And you interact, and then you, boom, you're good. So that's why I say the super zip line jump, like we mentioned before, and then you got to time it really well for this one. You see how I hit the sign very specifically there, and I'm hitting it. So it's a lot tighter, the timing. It's because I'm trying to do it wrong, and now I'm doing it wrong over and over again. But I guess that's a good example. Now let's go recreate the trailer footage. Remember that super zip line. If you have trouble with it, a friendly reminder, again, if you don't know how to get the timing of that zip line, just do this over and over again. Interact, jump. Interact, jump. You can stand next to it. You don't even have to do anything else. Interact, jump. Interact, jump. And then if you don't get it, then when it looks right, you fly up in the air. When you do it wrong, it looks like this, and you kind of propel forward. You want to be able to, you know, interact, jump. Interact, jump. And all you do is you piece all of it together, and it's going to take some time. It took me a little bit of time to nail it. And you can reclimb this and then try to get it right. But ideally, if you're being chased, you don't really want to do that. But it can be helpful, and you add a tap strafe into it. So let's go into stacks, because that building did move here, and I want to go recreate that moment that you saw from the trailer. Let's go take a look. I keep hitting the side of this. It's not working. Oh, there we go. I got it. Alrighty, so I'm going to be honest, that was not easy to do. Then it wasn't exactly perfect, but it mirrored it pretty close. The hard part is that every mantle that you do has a different timing. Remember how I mentioned how this one, especially in the trailer, is impressive movement. Whenever you stop, you don't climb immediately. So the timing is a little bit different compared to one where you can actually climb. So in World's Edge, whenever you have the monument section, it's a lot easier to pull off that movement tech than right here, because you have to essentially pull back. And even what's harder is the timing, because you'll end up kind of hitting up and you'll hit this. So you have a few things that are working against you here that are a little difficult. But remember, the biggest thing that I can always remind is just make sure you practice the timing and isolate movement out. So what that movement is that it was a super zipline jump. You have to really hit it back far, or else you go flying right like you did right there. So spinning it in, kind of tap strafing in. I know controller will have a little bit harder of a time to do that, which is, you know, I guess the unfortunate circumstance. But make sure you kind of hone it in, and then you can stop it by hitting crouch right here, but then you need to climb and move forward immediately. If you don't, you're just going to freeze in place, and you need to climb, but then look down immediately. And that timing is really tight. So, you know, the person who did that movement tech, even right there, it is a very tight timing. I'm going to be honest. So that was a very impressive movement. And then also what happens is if you do it too late, you literally kick up inside of here and almost feels like you'd be like teleporting, like, I don't know, you spawn elsewhere. It's pretty weird. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Finally, we're going to cover how to super glide. Let's just get into it. Today, we're going to teach you how to super glide jump on Apex Legends. I'm going to be up front. This is a first movement tech that I really could not figure out, and I had to watch some videos because I was literally stumped. When I explain my journey and how bad I was at it, you're going to really understand. I hope that motivates you as a watcher, because you might just understand this better than me. But also know if you're struggling with it, it's okay, because I struggled with that as well. I honestly watched Moki's video,
over and over and over again and listened to it, downloaded it, analyzed the footage, slowed it down, and also Verz, who was a founder of this tech movement. Both links are in the description down below. Be sure to show their videos some love. They are great content creators, especially Moki and Verz, for always being innovative and finding new ways. Their community overall and just finding new tech movements within Apex is always super inspiring. It inspires me. Now, I'm making this guide to discuss what I tried, my theories, and how I can perhaps help you to get an inch closer to understanding this movement tech. Disclaimer if it's not already clear that this movement tech is really difficult, and it's not a matter of the inputs, but a matter of learning the timing. I would say this is actually easier to do on console than it is on PC, but we'll get into that in just a moment. When I first tried this 4 months ago, I quickly gave up. But I spent over 16 hours straight, and here's everything I learned. Yes, I was that bad. First off, what is a super glide jump? It is whenever you climb an edge and you gain a massive acceleration boost by timing inputs that makes the game spike your velocity immediately up to 500. So on screen, I'm going to showcase this for you. This is a command line to see your velocity in game. Additionally, you're going to see the command line for capping your frame rate, which we'll also explain in this video later on of why that's important. Now, how do you do it? You need to climb, again, a piece of geometry that allows you to go through a climbing animation. At the absolute peak, the apex, the very tippy top of this climb, the frame will kind of give you this tug or freeze. You need to input space and crouch simultaneously. Now, I saw in the comments of Moki's video that some mentioned you have to do space before crouch. If they have within a 5 to 10 millisecond time frame. It's really, really tight. So it almost feels like it's just better just to input them at the same time. I utilize C for hold on crouch and space for jumping to hit them at the same time. Once you input those keys, you're literally going to be sent flying. That is when you see the acceleration happen. You can press them or hold them. Some prefer to hold to give some further distance to the glide. I see that by adding in the A and D for some movement. I personally was never really lucky holding all the time. My brain seemed like it moved slower, thinking I had to hold, and then I was not pressing the inputs at the correct time. Try both and see from the footage that holding sometimes works for me, and sometimes just pressing it, trying to get the speed to hit it at the right input also help. The goal, though, is to gain the 500 velocity boost. This again applies to the same principle in controllers. You press crouch and jump at the peak of the climb. And when you do it correctly in third person, the legs of the characters are going to extend fully out. And I have in the video description how to enable third person mode if you want to test it that way. That is how initially I learned this, just to kind of see what it looked like and how the velocity felt. Maybe that'll help you, maybe not. Just throwing it out there as an option. So let's talk about theories and tips. So it's interesting because such simple inputs should be really easy, right? Well, honestly, from my research, it seems like there's only about 3 frames to actually achieve this input. You can see on screen when you're climbing the wobble effect. To know when you're at the peak of the climb is when the wobble stops. I tried changing the shake settings. This really didn't help. I figured I would just give that input if you thought about trying it. Maybe it'll help you. I turned off and on the NVIDIA latency input. Cannot say if it really helped or not. The timing was still pretty difficult. You can see it visually and also feel a bit of a tug before you do it, but you got to hit it literally at the right moment. I found it was more difficult to start from the lowest point of the climb, jumping to an edge and then trying to climb immediately into that shake animation was a lot easier. I think the problem is that I was mentally freaking out from the anticipation of trying to hit it at the right moment, that I just tensed up and therefore I missed the input. Try that and maybe it'll help you as well. Capping your frame rate also makes this much easier as there's less frames for you to visually see, so the timing can be a little bit easier to get it at the exact input that you're looking for. I also saw in Moki's comment section that the scroll wheel worked. I unfortunately was never able to time it with the scroll wheel jump at all. The game seems to reject the inputs. This could be an issue of being just at a higher frame rate on PC. Maybe I was just really bad, but I also tried to get it right and I couldn't pull it off. Comment down below if you managed to succeed with this. I also found anything above 200 FPS was virtually impossible. That could also be the way the game is coded. I know it's ideal to be around or below 190. I achieved it maybe 1 out of 300 attempts with the frame rate uncapped, which is a really low percentage there. This is why console being locked to the consistent frame rate that I mentioned earlier is actually much more achievable. You can also cap your frame rate on PC, but it does take a little bit of time to adjust visually on the timing. Just because you drop the frame rate doesn't mean you're instantly going to start doing super glide jumps. It may, because you'll see it right away, and maybe not. So just try it out and give it a test to see if it works for you. And maybe dropping your frame rate. I even tried dropping to 30 frames per second, but then I wasn't still hitting it correctly. And it could have been because I was practicing incorrectly for so long at a higher frame rate that I had to readjust. So just some advice there. Maybe starting to practice this at a lower frame rate and then increasing the frame rate may help you if you're just trying to learn this. When doing this though, it feels like the game honestly feels impossible. Once I dropped the frame rate, I got around, it was a frame rate of under 190, and it increased my chances of doing it was once out of 150, which is still really bad. After endless hours of doing this, in the test range I could do it 1 out of every 75 attempts. This is much more difficult to achieve in the test range than I found actually doing it in game. What I found interesting is that when I was actually in game, I was able to achieve this 1 out of every 20 attempts. So that was very interesting. And then when I went back to the test range, it kind of felt a little bit more organic. Maybe because I was easing into it, maybe it was relaxing, maybe just the hard work, but nonetheless in game, it felt a lot easier. I have a few theories on that. The frame rate was dropping lower in game as well whenever you're into like the thick of a fight or you're just trying to move around. And also the latency of the servers maybe provides some leniency whenever the input showcases or whenever it actually showcases in game. Another interesting fact of how tight the timing is, in Moki's footage, this is the same also for my footage, the software we use to capture the input delays has a 2-frame delay to register the inputs. So you see in my footage slowed down, the game registers the acceleration immediately, but the inputs aren't recorded on the screen. When this spikes 2 frames later, you see the inputs on the software appear. If that does not show you how tight the timing is, I don't know what will. It feels like you're playing the old game from Chuck E. Cheese. It's incredibly frustrating. You're trying to hit the light and it just keeps going past it. That's what it feels like trying to get this movement to work. It's not that it's difficult input-wise, it's just the timing, like we mentioned time and time again, is very problematic. But it's so satisfying. Trust me, when you go flying, I felt so good when I finally got it to work. So if this takes so much time to master, why did I spend so much time doing it? Well, it's just the fun of it. Tech movement is always really fun, and wall bouncing at one point was really, really difficult, but you learn how to do it over time. And when the acceleration does happen, the movement is undeniably hard to hit. So, what is the application of this in game? What tips can I give? Everything you climb, just tap the inputs. You got nothing to lose. Worst case scenario, you're going to just jump forward. That's maybe the only downside. And then when you really mess this up, you'll sit in place, but you know that you really screwed up. You were just kind of like sitting in place and didn't even jump forward. Of course, don't fling yourself off the map. So if you're climbing over edges and you throw yourself off, just be mindful of when you use it. But I really didn't see much of a downside to attempting it, even if you're just kind of traversing and just kind of running around. I mean, imagine somebody sees you out in the open and then you use super glide jump. It means you're going to be harder to hit. Also, it helped me get more into the rhythm of this. It helped me practice it more, it helped me learn the movement of the game. It was all just a positive. Again, it was a ton of fun because you feel like Superman when you do it and you just fling forward. It's really satisfying. But I hope you guys found this video helpful. My journey, my tips that I was able to discover. Again, shout out to Moki for his amazing video on this. It honestly really helped me learn it. And the reason, again, I'm making this video is because hopefully through how bad I was at it, that maybe this journey may actually help you as well.
High level, we discussed how to piece all movement together. That's the concept. So in this portion, after you learn all this movement tech, we're going to talk about how to get smooth movement and how to think outside the box.
Answer the question, how do you get smooth movement on Apex Legends? I'm going to cover some topics I feel just aren't being discussed to really give you some tips and tricks. But let's answer the question first, what does this even mean? This was a question asked in my live stream, and they felt that wasn't really talked about on any YouTube videos whatsoever. It's a very simple concept, but I promise you I think you're going to learn a whole lot from this. Now, there's a lot of movement in the game. You can do a wall bounce, you can do a bunny hop, and for the time being, you can still do a tap strafe, or even as you saw there, a double tap strafe. And there's other movements such as even a zipline jump. So with all these movements within the game and everything that you can do, how do you tie them together to produce something that you can actually utilize in game? Which is also another common question. Why do I even need to utilize these? Well, the biggest tip I can provide, especially even when you're slide jumping, is first to understand when to use it and what stops you from having this mobility. So this target dummy actually moved over at a perfect moment, and whenever you have your velocity and moving, understand the peak when you reach that velocity. That's the most important topic initially, and also when to holster or unholster your weapon. Remember, whenever you have your weapon unholstered, your velocity is much slower. You see, once I get hit, I take a slow. But when your weapon is unholstered, you are much faster. the velocity increases at a faster accelerated rate as it would compared to not having your weapon out. Now, this is the first trick I really want to talk initially about, is knowing when to holster and unholster your weapon. So let's say you get into a gunfight and then you get a knock. You would unholster your weapon and try to move immediately to go for better positioning. You don't want to accidentally hit your melee key there, but that also comes with time and practice as you continue to improve. So let's say you were to knock one, but you need to reposition, so you unholster and move away. The unholstering is such an important technique to building velocity as fast as humanly possible. So how do you practice this? Well, if you're in the test range, the biggest tip I can provide is by simply utilizing your keys when to holster and unholster. Pull out your gun, unholster your weapon and slide. Pull out your gun, unholster your weapon and slide. And keep understanding this mechanic of when to pull out your gun and remove it. Now, for those that utilize the unholster by switching weapon by the scroll wheel, it might be easier for you to switch to a specific keybind to unholster your weapon. For me, I utilize the number 3, or I guess you could say the keybind 3. I press 3 whenever I unholster my weapon and I put it away. That's what I utilize. But practicing that is going to be the fundamental as well. Now, understand timing. Timing is very important whenever you slide, otherwise you're going to receive a dead slide. So things that can stop you in terms of your overall velocity when you're moving around are getting hit like you saw earlier, or even trying to slide jump a little too early. Let's say you try to slide jump immediately without building enough momentum, and you'll pretty much get stuck in place. This happens a lot, especially when you're in a gunfight, and you pretty much will panic in that moment that you're trying to slide jump to get away, but you need to wait for the velocity to move a little faster to reach your peak. This comes with time and practice. The best tip I can provide here is whenever you're slide jumping, just to make sure to reach your peak, and you can kind of feel it out in game. Now, another thing that impacts this is latency. You can practice this all in the test range, and right now I have a ping of 40, but when you're in game and you have a latency of, let's say, 100, even 200, it's going to feel like it's going to take longer until you reach that peak, and it's going to feel different. This is why having the overlays can be very helpful. I'm going to have in the description how to enable the overlay for the velocity C in the upper left, and then on the upper right, the performance display is actually linked here when you go into gameplay and settings. You can turn it off, and you can turn it back on. Now, the biggest advice I provide is at least know what your ping is at the start of the round, just to feel out what you're going to essentially have to deal with whenever you're in game. Because not every server is going to be the same, and when you're playing with friends from around the world, your ping is going to be different, meaning that your slide jump timing is going to feel a little bit off as well, especially when getting hit from a bullet. So let's wrap up and talk about when getting hit from a specific gun or bullet. Know whenever you're in a gunfight, and they're in between shots, is whenever you can build the momentum like you saw there to build up your speed. If you need to get away or the team calls for you to move. Now, I kind of dead slid there, and that's a really great example that if you're in a gunfight and you didn't wait for the velocity build up, then you need to wait for it to speed up a little faster. If you're looking at the velocity upper left hand corner, you can see if whenever it's too slow or not enough. Now, let's say you're in a situation, I'll wrap up with this final thought, where you're in a gunfight and then you're losing, but you need to get away to do a tech movement. That was actually a perfect example by the sheer panic. So I got hit, but my velocity slowed down, so I couldn't do a wall bounce. If you were committed to a gunfight, you need to pretty much commit, and running away is only a call if somebody's going to cover for you to get the ability to get the velocity to do some movement, or you have the upper hand. If you are in the middle of a gunfight and you're trying to shoot and they're already hitting you, you're going to have slow movement, especially if they're landing their shots already. So if they're landing their shots already, rest assured you're not going to have the quote-unquote smooth movement that you see from Fade, Lyric, or any popular YouTuber that you love watching whenever they're moving around. This is a timing thing, and this is going to come with time as you continue to improve on the game.
Then finally, we're going to go high level and piece together the mental and how to put it together in game. So let's deep dive.
I know I'm going to do an explanation at the very start, but this very much reminds me of what I'm doing like Fight Club. You go in and said, today your challenge is to spawn no-fill and try to use movement to get away or get into an encounter like you're going to see in this video. It's the rule of Fight Club where I think the line is, I believe the line is you're going to go out, you're going to fight with a total stranger. And honestly, maybe we start a movement. Go fight with movement with a total stranger and lose. Because you're going to master your movement.
When do you use movement on Apex Legends? So what we're going to cover is I'm going to land hot first. I'm not going to grab any weapons this whole time, and I'm going to showcase you over and over when to use movement in encounters. So I'm going to drop hot here in a second, I'm going to land, and I'm going to showcase what happens whenever you don't have any movement and showcase how fast you get eliminated. Then we're going to go back into the lobby, and I'm going to showcase what happens when you have a strafe. And then I'm going to highlight when you use movement in a fight and when you use movement to retreat. So that's going to be the premise of the video. So let's go ahead and drop hot real quick right now, and then we'll get into it. I'll jump cut. I'm going to stand here without much of a strafe and move forward, and you'll see I just get eliminated right away. So let's do this again. I'm going to drop. I'm going to showcase how much longer you'll save time by doing a strafe left and right. Okay, now you'll notice that this is my alt account, but I am running into Master Squad, so these players are pretty competent. They know what they're doing. Now remember, never walk into a straight line. I can't stress it enough. Don't walk in a straight line. This is like, if you ever seen Game of Thrones, you don't ever walk in a straight line. You divvy it up. You move left and right and you strafe. I'm going to showcase now, granted they had a flat line, how much longer you will survive by incorporating a strafe into your movement. So I'm going to land here. And again, all this what we're highlighting is how movement can extend and prolong your survivability, especially at these high caliber levels. Remember that if you're doing this at a lower tier level, that you're going to survive even longer. So let's take a look. So let's say they grab a weapon. Just strafing left and right. Look, they stopped focusing me. They stopped focusing me. Flat out, they stopped looking at me because I was strafing, doing a strafe left and right. Notice how much longer I survived compared to just going in a straight line and getting eliminated. Granted, I got shot by multiple people there. I wasn't even just shot strictly by the wingman. I got hit by a R99, a P2020, an EVA 8, and a wingman. I got shot, and that was by a predator. That was by a predator. This is actually going to be a fantastic video example. The Wraith flat out said, you know what? Let me finish somebody who didn't get a weapon, who's a higher priority and a higher threat. And notice the difference from strafing left and right and juking somebody, how movement can prolong your life. It's really, really important. Now what we're going to do is we're going to highlight when do you use a wall bounce in an encounter. So I'll highlight that and showcase how you can use movement. We're going to drop hot again and how you can move around corners. When do you wall bounce? When do you tap strafe? When do you use a tap strafe to get away? We're going to talk about all that different type of movement tech and break it down. I'm going to try to make this as fast and efficient as possible video because I don't want to waste your time. I want you to look at this video and realize, oh, very eye-opening and how it can help. Remember that while there is one way to do it, sometimes by baiting your enemy and standing still for a moment and then moving again can really throw them off. This is a way to kind of bait your opponent into making a mistake and missing their shot, which is the whole goal, which is what you saw there just a second ago. And it's against high caliber players, which I'm so happy that the RNG played in our favor. So I'm going to jump cut again. I'm going to highlight again. Now, when do you wall bounce? I may pick up a gun, but I'm not going to shoot it. And I'm going to showcase when can you wall bounce and what can you do to prolong your life. That's what movement is. I think people get confused thinking that movement is going to magically win you in the encounter. It doesn't work that way. Well, I'm getting into some crazy lobbies. Well, good example to showcase when you use movement, whenever you don't, right? So we're going to land hot again. I'm going to look for a team. I'm going to land on top of them, and I'm going to showcase when you can incorporate a wall bounce and a tap strafe to get away from an encounter. So I'm going to land near a team. I'm going to let them get the gun and what you can do to essentially get away. And maybe this will be the extent of the video because I'll try to highlight as much here as humanly possible for you guys to really see what you can do. So we just did the strafe earlier, and now we're going to, let's see, who's got a gun here? Let's land on this team. So let's say they have a gun, right? And they look at me, wall bounce over the wall, tap strafe. I can wall bounce again. I can jump down, and what I'm going to do right now, I'm a super zip line jump right here into a tap strafe to juke them. Wall bounce again, little wall bounce. Little tap strafe around the corner, move around again, and I'm going to zip up, not super zip lines jump. Then I'm going to wall bounce around the corner, but tap strafe really hard. Then I'm going to jump around the corner here. I'm going to tap strafe again a little bit down below. Then I'm going to super zip line. Oh, there we go. But look at that. That's actually crazy. That's crazy. You see how long you can prolong your life by moving around like an absolute maniac? And all I did, look, the team that was chasing me stopped being the team that chased me. And what you can do. It's little things. Now, whenever you have your gun out, and I'll do this as the next example. Whenever you have your weapon out, you have to know when to put your gun away and when to take it out to take some shots and move around. But you see, again, it's all about prolonging your life. So if I was able to go find a gun, move around a corner, you see where the tap strafe, it makes a sharper angle, so it's harder for you to reach. And also where you wall bounce to get over geometries. And honestly,
I'm not planning of this. I'm just going wherever the flow goes in terms of movement, just to make sure that I'm kind of on the whim, like just kind of using whatever resources that I have, right? But all I can do at that point, the other team ran. I unfortunately got run up by a different team because I landed on a seer team. Remember that. I landed on a seer team. So essentially after that, what ended up happening, I got run up by another team, but the other team just flat out just gave up, which is the whole point when you're trying to use movement to either push forward, get into an encounter. So the question is, when do you use a wall bounce to get into a fight? Well, you can use it to catch up. So let's talk about, instead of using it defensively, let's talk about the offensive version of movement, right? Let's talk about that, and we're going to jump cut here once I land. We'll get a gun. I'm not going to shoot, and I'm going to talk about whenever you use weaponry and your movement to get into an engagement. That's the overall goal. Now, one major tip, especially when you're trying to rotate, is always to make sure to slide jump. That's the basis. When you saw yesterday's movement where we're teaching wrist, I'll have a link down in the description down below. But make sure that you're using movement to always get towards where you need to go. Every second matters. Pretend that this is a speed run. Everything matters in terms of movement. So I assume that there's going to be a team located nearby. I'll at least pick up at least one gun, and I'm going to run towards the encounter, and we're going to highlight that. So alternator's pretty decent, but you got to remember when to put your gun away, when to take it out. You got to get really used to this. So another question was, do I use a scroll wheel? The reason why I don't is I don't accidentally want to switch back to my weapon and overuse the scroll wheel, especially whenever I'm using it for movement. Remember that. So, oh, okay, well, I want to use this for offensive purposes, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to bunny hop heal. So when people have that question, right? And you can wall bounce forward. That was not the best wall bounce, but still decent. And then you can reposition. So let's say I got into a gunfight here and they dropped on me. Let's pretend. So let's see where they're at. We'll try to find an angle, and I'm going to ADS towards them and then reposition and use movement to get into the fight. This isn't perfect. Remember, it's all about just exploring options. I'm giving you guys examples on how you can use movement. It doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. There's many different ways that you can use movement to get into a fight and reposition, and that's where you see the creativity and the excitement happen. So let's say I were to get into this encounter and I see them down below, right? Let's get their attention. Look at me. Look at me. So let's say I want to wall bounce in. Let's say I was at a different angle here, right? And I was going to wide swing the angle. So what I could do, now this is not a perfect wall bounce right there. What I could do is I could wall bounce here. Oh, not the best wall bounce. Let's reposition. We'll go here. See if they chase me. And I can use the wall bounce as like an aggressive maneuver to like go like that if I were to wide swing them. But if they chase me. If they chase me though. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're going to retreat and back up. But you want to use the mobility of wall bounces. Think of it again, speed run, speed run, speed run, speed run. How are you going to use movement to get you into a better position, to fly you up? That is going to be your overall goal. So I'm going to try to dance as many circles around this team. Let me take out this so they don't know where exactly I'm at. So they're inside right here, right? Look at that guy. Doesn't know where I'm at. But if I wall bounce over him, and I use it to reposition, then I pull out my gun, and I got stuck between all three, but essentially you saw how my movement was already throwing him off. I could have literally just lasered the guy in the back for free, or shot at him, and he was none the wiser. So that is really, you see where I use the wall bounce if they chase me and how to use it offensively. Just think outside the box when it comes to movement. This isn't going to be perfect, and these are just kind of in-world, in-game examples against opponents. It really surprised you because the skill-based matchmaking, you saw there was predators in the lobby. You'd be surprised how getting the upper hand movement, throwing enemy teams off, can really get you the jump on an opponent, especially when you're trying to cut around a corner faster, when you're trying to bunny hop heal and reposition. Everything is reposition, getting to a spot faster, and trying to get the jump on your opponent. That is the overall goal. I can't stress that enough, that it's going to be your biggest asset and your biggest strength. So we're going to do this one more time. I'm going to land cascades, and we're going to highlight some movement and how to use it more offensively and like whenever you ADS. Let us say you are in an example where you are strafing and then you have to reload. An example of what you can do after your reload is to slide jump into a wall and then wall bounce. Remember the biggest thing, and I'll try to see if I can get a perfect example of this in a second. I'm going to jump cut here to the next point once we are landing cascade. So we'll do that in just a second. For landing, I'm going to give you another tip. So most people say, well, I learned the movement tech, but I don't know how to incorporate it in game. You have to practice the movement tech where it becomes so natural and you know what you can wall bounce off of, movement tech, when you just tap strafe and everything, that it just becomes a second nature to you, that it feels just so comfortable. That's your overall goal. This is a lot of teams. Okay, I got a flat line, so I'm gonna grab that from them. Let's say they were shooting at me and I'm chasing them. Another thing to wall bounce towards. You see how I'm throwing them off? I could shoot, and then if I need to reposition, then I'll ADS and go back, and I'm putting away my weapon, right? Let's say that, okay, there's a team over there. what can I do for a movement here? Whenever you're stuck inside, well, you're really only going to be able to ADS. So what we're going to do is reposition here. And keep in mind, I'm tap strafing. You see, that's how I'm cutting these angles so sharp. And I'm going to queue up to avoid this gunfire right here because they're right here. So I'm going to take height right here. When you don't have a wall, really the only thing you can do is really tap strafe. So I'm going to use this, fly over here, and then reposition. I'm going to go into a bunny hop, right? What I'm trying to do now is lead the two teams together, which is the overall goal. Let's say it was in a building right here and I wanted to wall bounce around the corner to do something a little flashy, and then you can wall bounce like that, right? Or if you wanted to wall bounce here and push up, and I need a tap strafe and get away. There's a tap strafe. Right? Now I'm around the corner more, and I got away. But that's pretty much it. I'm going to bunny hop a little bit, see where I use that to get away and dodge that fire. Glad that's a good example there. Sometimes, remember, movement doesn't always pan out the way you want it to. Sometimes you will get shot. Sometimes they'll be able to track you very well. And we're going to bunny hop, heal away. Keeping that momentum forward. That's the overall goal. So remember, this isn't necessarily a guide how to do this. Remember, this is a guide of when to use this movement stuff. You're using movement tech to get in and into encounter, to reposition, to throw enemies off. Especially, let's see if I can get into a gunshot and then use movement to throw an opponent off. So let's say I were to shoot, right? Let's see if I can get an example here. Let's say I was shoot. Look at me. Hey, buddy. Hey, come back over here. Okay. Hey, look at me. Right here. Hello. Wow, nobody wants to look at me. That's crazy. Am I invisible now? Wish I had this when I actually play the game. Hey, buddy, look at me. And then you would kind of tap strafe around. You can do that. Let's say I was reloading. Here's a tap strafe, right? Throw your opponent off. Let's say I was shooting, right? And then I wanted to even do a small wall. Oh, I screwed it up. But that would be an example. That's whenever movement can go wrong, right? The biggest tip I can employ there for you is, one, while I'm shooting at them to get everyone to look at me, is two, make sure that you have maximum velocity. That happens a lot whenever you don't pay attention, you don't get maximum velocity. I was anticipating one person was shooting me, and unfortunately all three. So the only thing you can do in that scenario is literally turn and just shoot. You're not going to be able to wall bounce and do crazy amazing movement. You're just going to get eliminated. So just remember that. Remember how many people are looking at you at one point. So I'm glad that actually happened, because that's a good example. Usually you'll get slowed and you have to make sure, do you see your arms moving at a decent velocity? Did you wait the 2-second rule? Did you wait 2 seconds as you're running to build maximum velocity? What you could do is do the jump fatigue there, but the problem is that I was at a little bit of a slope, so kind of screwed up my movement. It kind of is what it is. So I think that's pretty much everything I want to cover. I want to get into a gunfight in a hallway, and I'm going to see if I can do that, and then showcase a wall bounce afterwards. And I've already showcased in terms of a tap strafe as well. But I think that covers at least the mass majority, at least getting you to think outside the box. I'm going to jump cut again here in a second. Okay, the last example I want to highlight. Remember, again, I can't stress enough, slide jump to everything you do, but learn the maximum velocity. Can't stress that enough. I know I'm trying to talk to the movement just so you kind of understand it specifically. I want to stand near a building. I'm surprised they're landing on top of each other. That's insane. So I'm going to land over here, close by. And to highlight, if you were in a gunfight, when you can do a wall bounce afterwards as you reload. So I got a gun, but I'm not really going to shoot it just unless I want to get their attention. Let's go inside here. Because you essentially you're going to start off with a strafe. And this is just one I see everyone that they want to see. So they're going to be up top here. I'm going to shoot just to get their attention. Let's say I was shooting, shoot, and then I reload, right? And then I wall bounce. There we go. To throw them off. That's where you can put it in. The problem is that most people get thrown off by, and there's a slide jump away. You put away the gun and reposition. That most people get thrown off by this movement. And this is a little horizon tip right here, because I'm side strafing back and forth to see if she's going to come up. Is where you have to remember, are they shooting at you? Did they land the shots? Because if they land the shots, well, what's going to happen is that you're going to be instantly slowed. So let's get an armor swap and let's do this again. So if I were here, take a shot. Oh god, I got stuck on the wall. And that's just what happens sometimes. I got stuck in the little curvature right here. But I'm glad I died, because then I can wrap up the video here. But you see where, if I were to go back and you were to go watch what happened at whenever I took some shots and then I wall bounce and reposition, because I was reloading, right? Because I needed to reload my gun. I needed to incorporate some movement. If they're shooting at you and you get slowed by the bullet, you have to realize whenever they're not shooting and they're repositioning, and whenever you want to just keep mobility and get a different angle and reposition overall. I hope this is very helpful for those out there, especially as you're trying to get your movement. The only thing I can tell you is that you have to just go into the test range to the point where you don't think about this, where it becomes like they say when you're using a controller or mouse, where it just becomes an extension of your arm or your hands, and you just feel so comfortable with the movement where you don't think about it, where it looks so fluid, where you're like, oh, I'm wall bouncing, I'm bunny hopping, I'm going to do a tap strafe, I'm going to do, you know, if you super glide, if you time that masterfully. I don't get it all the time, unfortunately, because I don't practice it enough. But there you go. It's good movement to learn whenever you're trying to do nice clean tap strafes, whenever you're trying to bunny hop and slide jump, everything. It should just come second nature, and if it doesn't, it will. You just got to put the hours in, and that's where movement, it's just like doing any other movement where you just get the timing and understand what to do.
Now, I know this video is super long, but I hope you found it educational and helpful. Thank you all so much for supporting, watching, and of course, we'll see you guys all in the next video.